Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This is Ann Patchett's latest novel. It is set kind of in modern day. So the framing of this story is that you are kind of following this woman named Laura as she is telling a story of her past. So the present day story is taking place during 2020. It's in northern Michigan, and they are a family of like cherry farmers basically. And so all of the daughters have recently come back home because of COVID. And the mother is telling the story as like a way to kind of occupy their time a little bit while they're all handling lockdown and things like that. And the story that she is telling is about this famous actor named Peter Duke, who is someone who she actually worked with as an actress and also had a romantic relationship with. And so in my head, I was imagining this as like the story of someone like telling their daughters about how she like knew like Brad Pitt or something like that once upon a time. And she knew Peter Duke from this place called Tom Lake, which was also in Michigan. And it was basically this small town that had this theater, and she was putting on a production of Our Town. And she was the main female character, and he was one of the lead actors in the play. And so that is like the main idea behind what the story is in terms of plot. Obviously, a lot of plot happens because you're flashing back and forth in time. And so you're dealing with both what this family is dealing with in the modern day with these daughters who are basically in their like late teens, early 20s, like they're all basically college age or older, and they are growing up and figuring out their own lives. You are dealing with the family as they are cherry farmers, and so, farming in modern day is not super easy, but also like dealing with COVID and lockdown and things like that. Like they don't have enough workers to pick all the cherries, and if they don't pick all the cherries, they could lose money, and all these different stressors that have come into play. But the other thing is the fact that these daughters like know who Peter Duke is, and also know that like their mother dated Peter Duke and knew who Peter Duke was and things like that. And so they all have kind of like these preconceived notions of their mother's relationship with Peter Duke and what exactly happened. And now she's basically giving them the full account. This story is really just like a really well written story in so many different ways. Like this is the story of like these young adults figuring out their lives both in the past and present. But it's also a story about like acting. It's a story about falling in love. It's a story about how complicated life is sometimes and how difficult it is to express that when you are telling stories to other people about your own life. It's a story about young love, but also like how young love isn't true love. And it's also a story about like family. And it's about like kids who are seeing their parents as like fully formed humans for maybe the first time in their lives. The story, again, is just written in a really interesting way where like that like this person is telling the story to another person, and so every now and then you'll get interruptions from the kids in modern day talking about how they didn't think that's how the story went, or doing the thing that kids do. And I keep saying kids even though they are kind of adults, but they're doing the things that kids often do to their parents where they're like, wait, I thought that this is what actually happened, or they're trying to like tell their parents their own story when the parents are like, no, you don't know all the details, or like you have it wrong. Like I actually know what happened because I lived the experience. Things like that, which I thought was just like really clever and really well done, and also just does a good job of establishing the relationship between the parents and the kids and things like that, and shows in a really easy way kind of like how all of these different people relate to each other. But there's also a way that like Ann Patchett has written and framed this story that also leaves it as kind of a mystery. As you get deeper into the book, more and more details emerge about like what's happening in the 2020 timeline as well as what has happened in the past. And it's not done on purpose to a certain extent, but it is like really nice the way that Ann Patchett reveals details about these characters' lives that end up impacting and influencing the way that you view them, the way that you feel about them, all these different things. At this point, I think I've read the majority of Ann Patchett's books, and so I feel like Ann Patchett does this thing with her fiction stories where she like has almost a mystery sense to it, but like you don't realize that there's a mystery until you're like deep in it. And there are like reveals that happen later on in her books that end up really influencing the way that you're viewing the whole structure of the story, or they really influence the way that you feel about certain characters and all of these different things. And I feel like she does that really, really well. I also just really enjoyed, though, how honest and real this story felt. There is a certain aspect of reading books that take place in COVID that, like, to me personally, like, I view them with a slightly more critical eye, partially because I don't feel like there's enough distance from it to provide good perspective yet. There is a perspective, but I don't know whether or not it's a good one. So I always like view books with that framing with a slightly more skeptical eye. And I don't know if I necessarily love the fact that this took place during 2020. Like, I think that Ann Patchett is just starting to scratch like the feelings of wanting to express what life was like during that time period, but I don't know if it necessarily needed that as a framework. Like, it kind of feels a little bit like a gimmick, to be honest. I think there are lots of reasons why kids would return home to be with their parents, and that would bring this about. But it also does like impact some of the choices that are made by the characters in the modern timeline. So I mean, it's like one of those things where I don't know if it was needed, but I also don't know fully if that would change the way that I felt about this novel, if it was just placed during any old time period and there was another reason why all the kids had to be at home. I ended up picking up this book while I was on vacation, and I remember like I started it while we were on the plane ride home, and I just like could not put it down because I just found this to be such engaging writing. I found the characters to be like just super intriguing because of the way the story is set up. It really does keep you hooked because you want to know what's going on, what's going to happen to these characters in the past, as well as what's going to happen to the current day versions of them. And kind of seeing all of the puzzle pieces come together was just so fantastic. I don't think that this is my favorite Ann Patchett novel. I do think The Dutch House still is the top, but I do think that this belongs in like the pantheon of like the really great Ann Patchett books, like up there with State of Wonder, up there with Bel Canto. Like, this is just masterfully done. And like, Ann Patchett is one of those writers I've been reading for a really long time in my history. And so I feel like it's been so much fun picking up her books because I've seen how she's grown a lot as a writer and all of the little tweaks and changes that she makes in the way that she writes her stories. But they all still have the essence of wanting to tell these really close relationship stories and explore some of the mysteries of life and things like that. And I love her as an author. I think she's an all-time favorite for me personally. And yeah, this one just definitely did not disappoint. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read this book and what your thoughts were on it. Or if you have any questions about the book, feel free to leave that down in the comment section as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.